Hello and welcome to this week's episode of your Power Packed Podlets. My name is Rachel and I'm your host for these mini magical journeys together. These are short podcasts for my heart-led women out there hungry to build life on your own terms. To be able to decide what you do with your time and how much money you get to make doing what genuinely lights you up. And this week's episode, for a lot of you, is going to land so powerfully. In fact, I think you're going to find it really fun as well listening to this, because the majority of you following along, whether you're listening on Telegram, YouTube, or somewhere else, you generally fall into one of two categories. You are either one of my women in corporate or a really well-paid job. You've either just left your job and you're starting to build your own business, or you're in the process, you're hungry to make that transition, and you're probably scared about doing it as well. And then there's my other group of women. You are the free souls that you have been building life on your own terms. You've potentially been on this really adventurous journey, traveling a lot, probably backpacking, walking barefoot through the fields, and living this most glorious life. For that second group, today's episode is going to really land. Now, for those of you, you're potentially in corporate or you've just left a really well-paid job, I invite you to listen to this week's episode through a slightly different lens, and you're going to get so much gold from it. Because you potentially have been telling yourself the story that to be making the kind of money that you've been making in a job is really hard to make through something that you genuinely love doing. That freedom, and potentially if you've been in a corporate world for a while, really understanding the frequency of freedom, time freedom, nervous system freedom, freedom from stress, this is a new concept for you, to be able to make your own decisions and do what you want to do with your time. And so I invite you to listen to this week's episode through that lens. So today we're talking about unmet desires. And the fact that I can almost guarantee that there are things that you desire deep down within yourself that you're not even aware of, that you've been suppressing because it is much easier to pretend you don't want something because you're telling yourself it's so hard to get it, or it's impossible to have it, or it's bad to allow yourself to receive it. And so it's much easier to suppress that desire and not even look at it. So you might find, listening to this, that you recognize something you really want, and it might make you feel a little bit tingly, because when we realize there's something we want, then it's like, oh fuck, now I've got to go and make it happen. Now I've got to commit to it. Now I've got to become emotionally invested in it. And this is where we start to go through, Bob Proctor talks about this, conflict. Yeah, so this is why a lot of us suppress things we want, because the conflict phase is when we really allow ourselves to want the things we want. Let's say you want financial freedom. Let's say you want to do what genuinely lights you up, and you want to make enough money that you don't even have to think about money anymore. That you know you're setting yourself up to be able to retire in 10 years. And when we actually get really emotionally involved in this, we start to go through conflict because it brings up the stuff that resists us allowing it. And the reason I know this is I've got this really clear memory when a desire I'd been suppressing became very clear. I was sitting on my balcony and I was doing my morning practice, and I had one of my clients in my mind, this multi-millionaire who was having challenges with his health. And I was feeling this frustration because I knew that he wanted it, and at the same time, his habits of not being healthy were so ingrained. And being able to serve this client, I was asking myself, how can I serve this client? How can I help and guide them to getting the results they want when their habits, unhealthy habits, are so deeply ingrained within them? Why is it this person is so good at making all of this money and yet cannot look after their health? And as I asked myself the question, it was as though a mirror was put up in front of me as I suddenly realized something. Because he was a person who had prioritized financial health, financial freedom, for the majority of their life. And so they were moving hundreds of thousands of euros every single day without even batting an eyelid, knowing how to be so comfortable with making money, with moving money, with investing money. They didn't even question it. And here I was, an expert at what I do, exceptional at what I do, giving an exceptional service. And I prioritized my mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. And so for me, these things, I didn't even have to bat an eyelid. I didn't even have to question how to do them. It was easy for me. And with 15 years experience in what I was doing, really good at what I did, and making 2,000 to 3,000 euros a month, which in Spain, most people would say that's a really good income for what you're doing. Thinking that most people here make about 1,200 to 1,500 a month. And with 15 years experience, I suddenly realized I was no longer available for so little income. With the level of expertise I had in that moment, had I been working for someone else, I would have climbed up the ladder. I would have been promoted and given another title, another role, and yet I hadn't done that for myself. And it was this sudden realization that I was way more than the title I'd been giving myself of well-being coach and yoga teacher, spiritual guide, personal trainer. That I had reached a point in my career of experience that it didn't suffice, that title, nor the income. And I suddenly realized this unmet desire, because here I was, this free soul, this nomadic hippie, that had been my reality, my identity for the majority of my life. Let me give you a little bit of context, because this is fun as well, to give you a visual. So my dad, he got married in flares, this brown suit with flares and big curly hair. And my mum was this flower power woman who loved to wear like feminine lace and long flowy dresses. They still kind of are that as well. They still have that in their heart. And so this is what I was brought up on. My parents would gather their friends. My dad would get out his guitar and start playing and singing Beatles songs. And we'd go on holiday to camp in the fields in France and run around barefoot with the other kids and play in the fields and the rivers. That's been my childhood. And going into adulthood, it was going off to the jungle in Mexico with no electricity and living in a wooden hut. I've had the most beautiful, adventurous life of doing in 1 year what most people don't do in a lifetime. And there was this really powerful unmet desire to have financial freedom. Up until that point in my life, the only things I had owned was a sofa, a bed, some cutlery, and my clothes. Complete freedom. And in fact, the moment I owned the bed and the sofa, I suddenly realized, oh wow, I own something that ties me to a place. And that felt like a really big deal. And I acknowledged there was a hunger in me for financial freedom, to not have to question, can I afford this? Can I go there? Can I travel to this place? Can I do this thing with my friends? Can I buy myself a new laptop? Can I invest in a house? I was done having to ask myself, can I afford this? I was ready to feel so at ease with money, like I feel at ease, or felt in that moment at ease, with food in my body, with my fitness, with my health, with my spiritual path. And the thing is, when we meet a desire and become emotionally invested in it, it wasn't that I woke up the next morning and suddenly having financial freedom was easy. Because what was required was then the dissolution, the dissolving of all of the identity of poverty that I had believed was me up until that point. I believed that somebody like me couldn't make more money. I believed that I couldn't make money doing what genuinely lit me up. I believed that making more money meant less freedom. I believed that money was hard to make. And so whatever your unmet desires can potentially be, there will be identity pieces that you are either consciously or unconsciously holding on to. And for this new reality to be birthed and to be a logical part of your day to day. So for me now, a logical part of my day to day is financial freedom, not thinking about money. It's liberating. But to reach this point, it required the dissolution of a lot of what I thought I was for the new identity to be birthed, to become really acquainted with what a hippie who has financial freedom thinks, the frequency she holds, how she moves through life, how she runs her businesses, or business, should I say, how she thinks about business investments, the types of conversations she has with her team, how she interacts with somebody who's helping her in her business and build the different things. There's so many nuances of how I had shown up until that point that no longer served me to actually birth the desire that I had to be a hippie who's also financially free. And so I invite you to ask yourself, if you could have everything you desired, and you were to let go of the perception that any of it was impossible, bad, or wrong, because if the financial conversation is the one for you, I can guarantee if you're not making what you want right now, there are things that you believe, like people who make a lot of money are bad. That if you're this nomadic free soul, once you make more money, you lose that part of yourself. And you're not willing to, because it's part of what makes you happy. So when we truly meet a desire, it requires that we be with the resistance to it, and that we acknowledge we're resisting it as well, so we can allow ourselves to have it. So let me ask you again, if you were to truly allow yourself everything that you want in love, in your health, your well-being, your freedom, what's freedom to you? Like, what is freedom to you? If you were to allow yourself everything you wanted, what is an unmet desire you've been suppressing because you think you can't have it, or it's wrong to have it? And if you choose to have the courage to become emotionally involved, because it does take courage, to meet an unmet desire and allow yourself to have it requires courage, because it requires actually facing the resistance, shifting the identity, changing your belief systems, and acting from a different place. And this is why, if you've ever asked yourself, why is it only a small percentage of people really make it in business? This is a huge part of it. Because most people stop when that moment of conflict arises. When you are called to step up and do things you've not done before in ways you've never done them, that requires another level of leadership, of courage, of stretching yourself, of investing in things you've never invested in before, most people will retreat back to what they know, the identity they're familiar with, and the zone of comfort that feels safe. This is why most people don't really make it. So then my last question is, will you continue to suppress your unmet desires because that's the easy path, and stay in the arena of being moderately okay? Or do you choose to be one of the people who goes for exceptional, who decides that this is your life? Why would you not go for exceptional? Why would you not do things that make you proud of who you are? To be on this path of consistent growth, not because you have to, because you choose to, because it lights you up. Because if that is what you choose, if that's what you lean into, it's not that you choose it once. Those of us you see thriving, we choose it again and again and again, because on this path, when what you choose is courage and growth and exceptional, on this path, there are obstacles, that things arise. Challenges in life arise. And it's about how you meet those challenges. Do you decide that that's what's going to stop you from having what you want? Or do you decide that the challenge is what is calling you to up level in a new way? To become the next level of leader and lead yourself in another way. Because it's in those moments that it is deciding again, I commit to having the most exceptional life. Not because I have to, because I choose to. I commit to allowing myself to dream big and then to actually follow through on those dreams and become emotionally invested in them. I choose to be the person who never gives up on themselves, who always finds a way, not because I have to, because I choose to. So when you adopt this, when you choose to be that every single day in the face of your fears, this is when insanely incredible things happen, not just in your business, in your life as well. Why would you not go all in? What if there is only one life? When you come to the end of it and look back, what will you be so grateful that you did?